Let's talk how to make vodka. We've spoken about still designs that you need to get to high proof. We've spoken about the Holy Trinity in flavors. We've spoken about what flavors you need in a vodka and what you don't need. But how do you actually make a vodka? Well, first of all, let's do a little bit of background. Vodka is a drink that comes from Russia. It means water or little water. And basically what it means is it is a very pure drink. Traditionally, it's made from grains or potato, preferably grains, rye and wheat, and potato as well, just any kind of staple that they could get their hands on. They would ferment it into a sort of beer and traditionally distill it 3 times. And if you distill it more often, you get more chances to cut out heads and tails and you get a more pure product. It is not aged. Originally it wasn't fruit infused and all those things that you see nowadays under the vodka label. It was just a very pure drink. If you take cuts twice or 3 times, because you do 3 instead of 2 distillations, like you would traditionally on a whiskey, you get a more pure product. You can drink more without getting a headache. And you don't need to age it because it's quite one-dimensional. You remember the grid with only 1 X, not even in the middle, but low down. There's a little bit of mouthfeel in the middle. Maybe you should be able to distinguish between the creaminess of a potato-based vodka, the slight spiciness of a rye-based vodka, or the mellow, almost neutrality of a wheat-based vodka. In Europe, vodkas have to be bottled at 37.5% or more. We sometimes see like Stolotnaya that brings out a 50%. To me that doesn't really make sense, because the more you dilute your alcohol with water, and water, well, hopefully tasteless water, neutral water, the more you dilute flavor. So I think 38% for a vodka is an amazing percentage. Why go 42? You'll just have more flavor, which is not the goal in a vodka. You might go 40 because in other countries, in other continents, sometimes the definition of vodka is actually that it needs to be above 40%. So in that case, you can't go 37.5 like I do, or 38, which is my preferred go-to vodka percentage. You have to stay at 40. But if it is 40, really no need to go to 45, because you'll just add potentially 5% to 40 is 11% more flavor. And the goal of vodka is to create purity and neutrality, not a long-lasting sensation in your mouth. Now, a lot of people also have their vodka chilled because, well, why? Why do they have it chilled? It's better that way. I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure that chilled or almost frozen vodka is better. But I tell you a little secret on what it does to your palate. If you drink something that is so cold that it is basically below 10 degrees Celsius, I think it starts to happen at 12 degrees Celsius already, but especially below 10, what happens is that your taste buds in your mouth, on your tongue, are going to go numb. So if you want your crappy beer to taste good, at least not bad, you chill the crap out of it and all of a sudden it's still drinkable because the off flavors don't hit you. You don't recognize them. If a vodka is about purity and neutrality, if you numb your taste buds, you're not tasting. And if you're not tasting, you can say, hey, it's neutral, or at least I don't taste anything, so it must be vodka. I think a well-made vodka doesn't need to be chilled, or at least chilled that much. There's a little bit in the middle, and that's all there is. Anything else that's there is badly made, poorly made product. Yeah, you can chill it in order to make sure you don't taste it, but just buy a better bottle, or in your case as a craft distiller, make a better bottle of vodka, please. I want to try it, I want to come over, I want to be positively surprised. I don't want to wake up with a headache the next morning. Pretty selfish here, but yeah, you can explain it to me, you can explain it to your customer, and that is important. Vodkas nowadays in the United States have to be distilled at 190 proof, and in Europe even at 192, relating to 95 respectively, 96% alcohol purity. I think it's total belongus. Of course, the number of distillations allows you to get rid of certain flavors, and I'll get into that. And of course, if this is the legal framework within which we have to operate, we'll just have to hit those targets. But really, if you look at the traditional vodka and how it's made, it was distilled 3 times on a simple pot still, if even that. And that basically means that traditionally a vodka was never distilled above 85 or 90%. So I don't know what's behind this, but I've got the feeling it's sort of governmental intervention to make sure not everybody can make it because it is such a well-accepted drink. I think the biggest drink in the world in terms of liters consumed. So if we make it impossible to make, we can control who makes it. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. All right, for instance, the United States, you can make vodka from anything. So not just from wheat and rye and potatoes, but you can make it from rum. As long as you hit 190 proof, you can call it vodka. Should you go there? I'm not sure. It really depends on your palate and your story. We've got a distillery in Florida that does a lot of rums, and they make vodka from their rum. That makes sense. On a personal level, and that's just me personally, I don't like sweet tasting vodka. So the whole molasses vodka correlation doesn't work for me. Also, corn vodka doesn't work for me because there's an inherent sweetness to the flavor profile of that vodka. Small, sits in the middle, but it's still there, and I don't like it. So I like rye because I like spice. Most people like wheat because it is more pure than anything. Some people say they like potatoes, but that's the ones who don't actually have to work with potatoes. Horrible to work with. If you want to make potato vodka, my advice is simply think again and then make it from wheat or rye, okay? Or even from molasses if you're not from Europe. Okay, vodka is about purity. You remember the grid for vodka? Here we go. Front of mouth, middle of mouth, back of mouth, a little bit in the middle, nothing at the front and the back. Taste intensity, low taste intensity because it's a very pure product. You remember from the Holy Trinity, heads, hearts and tails. See how my drawings get worse and worse the longer I speak about it? That's because I sort of expect you to pick up on this automatically already with the smearing points for heads and the smearing point for tails relating to certain flavor profiles. And remember how that smearing from the heads, fruity flavors, equals 30%, and the smearing of the tails, 50%, and just 20% in the middle for the substrate. Let's say the rye or the wheat or the potatoes, in this case the vodka, because we're talking vodka, is made from. Fermentation, very easy. If you can, off the grain. If you can, pH neutral. Please control the temperature, make sure they don't go too high, and don't ferment too long. If we look distillation of vodka, quite simply what you need to do is cut out as much of the heads and tails as possible, because if you are successful, and I'm exaggerating here or how much product you need to cut out, but just to make it visual, if you cut out all the heads and the tail smearing, you're basically left with a substrate of 20% flavor. And that correlates perfectly with this position, which is the ideal grid, the ideal definition of the flavor profile of any vodka. The issue is that if you have to use a pot still to basically do this, the separation power of a pot still, as you've learned, is only 1. You need a shitload of redistillations in order to get rid of all the heads and the tails. And that means that you're left with very limited numbers of heads and tails. This is where column distillation comes into play. This is a situation of smearing, the above picture. Let's use some colors here. The red one for the heads, so they're over here. And let's use blue for the tails, they're over here. We're not going to use a color for the hearts because, hey, it's vodka, they should be clear and crisp and clean with very low flavor profile left. If we do one distillation, we get a lot of smearing or we lose a lot of product. So either we do get excess here because we cut too wide, or we have to throw out a lot of product that we don't recover. The fun thing is that if you distill more often, you can actually create a better separation between heads, let's use the same, hearts and tails. The more often we distill, the less smearing we get. It's a bit like looking at a skyscraper, and at some floor some guys step into the elevator, and the elevator is rigged in such a way that let's say the heavy dudes 2 out of 3 times go down and only 1 out of 3 go up. And the lighter ones, 2 out of 3 go up and 1 out of 3 go down. So the elevator does a selection based on weight, but it's not perfect at it. Just like distillation does a selection on molecular weight. Heavy dudes here, light dudes come over first, but that selection isn't perfect because it's smearing, which is a good thing for flavor, but a bad thing for the purity we're looking for in a vodka. So imagine people stepping into those elevators, and some are the light ones and some are the heavy ones. Even though the selection process is only 2/3 right, in the end, if we add enough elevators and enough floors in the building, for sure the heavy dudes are going to all end up here. And even though we may see an occasional heavy dude over here, by the time we are near the top, you will only have the very light molecules, the very light flavors. So the more often we distill, the more distillation cycles we can do, the more plates we have in our column, the more distillation cycles we can do in our distillation machine, the better the separation is between heads, hearts, and tails. And in an optimized situation, I don't have a lot of space left, we basically create heads. Now let's use green for the good stuff. Hearts. Blue for the tails. And that's the tails. And you can see 2 things happening. First, there's no smearing anymore. There's perfect separation between heads, hearts, and tails. So now you can get rid of the heads at a certain temperature and there's none left. You can stop hearts and there's almost none of the good ethanol and flavor left. And all the flavors of the tails are in the tails. So that's the first good thing. The second good thing is that somehow by multiplying the number of distillation cycles, we push the heads and tails into very small fractions. And that is because, remember acetone as one of the light molecules that come over during the first part of the run that create a sort of nail polish remover smell and taste in your drink you want to get rid of? Even a few molecules go a far way taste-wise. So even though there are not many of those molecules, even one here may be noticed. By distilling again and again, we make sure that those light ones are up here. We can draw them off separately. But there are very limited numbers all of a sudden if we group them together, if we pack them together. So by multiplying the number of distillation cycles in your still, you're separating heads, hearts, and tails perfectly and pushing the heavy dudes to one end, the end of the run, and the lighter ones, the low boiling point alcohols, to the beginning of the run. How many distillations do you need? How many floors do you need in your skyscraper to get perfect separation between heads, hearts, and tails? Well, the magic number is 14. And it so happens that 14 translates to 96% alcohol. And that's the highest you can get. You can't get to 100% alcohol. That has to do with 96%, 4% water mixture having a lower boiling point than 97 or 98. This is a weird thing that happens when water and alcohol combines. But take me for it, take my word for it, 96% is like the maximum. And you need 14 distillation cycles to get there. But we did more research. And what we found is that this is one measure. This is the measure to how high you want to get your alcohol proof. If we do up to 40 distillation cycles, we get this perfect separation. So even if we do more distillation cycles than 14, up until 40, we get better separation of heads, hearts, and tails. So less flavor smearing, a more pure and crisp and cleaner vodka, And at the same time, by pushing heads and tails out of hearts, we create more product. When we did 41 distillations and we had this CNG tested, we didn't get better results. So anything above 40 doesn't work. So your sweet spot needs to be somewhere here as close to 40 as possible. Now that's a lot of distillations, but the iStill gets you there. You can use a plated still. They usually sell them at like 14 plates, but you can now understand that it's still a way off from the 40 you need for perfect separation. It's one of the reasons why many of the copper manufacturers that sell plated stills don't sell them for vodka anymore, because more and more they realize that they are really not hitting the targets they should hit here as well as in separation power. Sad story, but you better know it before you invest 150 grand with them. Now you do. Okay, well, how do you dilute it? To what percentage? Lower is better, because lower means even less flavor. What water do we use to dilute it with? I would say the cleaner the water, the better. The less mineral, the less flavors there are in that water, the better it is, because you don't want to muddy up a great result. I think that's basically it about vodka, and the goal for you guys is to, well, you've got a few bottles that you bought for testing, right, to develop your palate, to work with the grid, the taste grid, and redistill it, and make sure that you use that little knob that sits in the iStill Mini and turn it all the way to the closed position. Start distilling. Look at your temperature probe. See how the temperature drops to around 78 degrees, which is the boiling point of pure ethanol, indicating that you're probably very close at, if not at, 96%. Leave it there. Leave it there for 10 minutes, and then slightly open the knob and take out the heads and see how concentrated they are, much more than in the whiskey. We get rid of them. You keep the valve open only on a small opening, because the smaller the opening, the more distillations you get, and you keep and maintain your separating power in place, making sure that you don't get the tails over at the end of the run. And try to keep it at 95, 96%. Measure it every now and then. Don't drink it at 96%, because that will burn your throat in a very, very bad and life-threatening way. Always dilute it to around 40%. Give it a few weeks to marry, and you'll see that even with an iStill Mini, which is just a 7-8 liter still, you can make better vodka than the vodkas you've bought in the store to test your palate with. And that's all I had to say about vodka for today. Thanks.